wish I could bathe in the moonlight. Ooh, this is it now. Come out of the shadow. Ooh, make the walls fall. Memory is headed for disaster. Heart is beating slow. I hear the words, I see the ghost of laughter in the afterglow.
Już na miejscu, Sinliwa, czy poradzi sobie z midlane teraz niebieska gaming, bardzo dobry timing, Lostu kajtuje, ale kończysz, Keszero się uratuje, Soner pokoju za rywalem.
Ojo con el barril, ¡gol sorteado! Oscar Inin che sta facendo una partita.
Si sta svolgendo, gran capo da solo contro Deidara, si porta a casa una kill in solitaria, adesso volge lo sguardo anche verso Aciù, mancano qualche secondo per il l'esempio della barra della furia. Deve trovare un modo di chiudere la distanza con Aciù, lo trova, lo schianta contro il muro, il CC si presenta ma sarà in tempo, Capo trova anche la seconda kill, sopravvive!
Eats this chaos all over the map. X7 are ahead of the play. Goodbye, Duel.
Now Shikari's in trouble, he's going to try and find his way out, wait for the Shadow Surge, and the Rockies just go wide, but a final auto secures it anyway.
La One a été loupée. La One, non, c'est bon, ils ont la mission, c'est le plongeon, le fight est bon. Le fight du clutch, le team fight qui éclate, Xa kick.
Adesso è chiaro, ha sentito l'altro di colpo palla, ne avevamo letto Kaitu e Oliopri sta dietro, dann ist die Belacco sta. Schattansturm Moonlight ebenfalls drauf, Prime ist wieder der. Der Hook von Wisdom sichert jetzt eine doppelte Überzahl.
Από την ομάδα των φαντασμάτων, ο Warden θα πεθάνει σε λίγο.
Solo che la Pepe! Oggi che το triple kill! Επόμενος όκος είναι ο Μπρόλια! Θα πάρει το Quadra!
I'm not here to make friends.
Alors que Reckless, le moment du côté de Reckless, le passif d'Agis qui prend, le duel un petit peu qui est parti, la femme, Quadra kill.
Hello everybody, welcome to the Amazon European Masters. We're on to day 2 of groups and we've got nothing but bangers for you today. It's Viper and Jamada with the first half of the day. Jamada, how are you getting on? Are you excited?
Yes, I am very excited. I'm very excited to be with you on the Amazon European Masters. It's something that we've actually not been able to do together somehow. Spend a lot of time together, but we've never managed to make it to this tournament together. So I'm very excited to be here with you, Will, and I'm very excited after what we saw from yesterday's games.
Absolutely, we had loads of massive games yesterday, so much action, and all started here. Ultraliga taking on the LFL.
Yeah, absolutely, and I mean, Vitality B coming out looking absolutely amazing in my opinion. I think Go Rogue definitely looked maybe not as strong as maybe some people were hoping. I think Go Rogue definitely looked very strong domestically, and there's a lot of talk about how strong Poland are as a region right now, but against Vitality B, they really didn't manage to show up properly. Here though, Atleta versus LDLC, this was a much closer game than maybe people were anticipating. I think LDLC came out looking a little bit sloppy, and I think Atleta maybe caught them off guard initially with Enz pulling out his Draven so early on in the tournament, right? I think Atleta, if they have a slightly more traditional draft in terms of just having a slightly different and more hype-scaling AD carry, I think they have more of a way in that game into the later stages. And of course, Use versus Bisons was quite the exciting one. Random pulling out the Ivern mid. He's very known, of course, for pulling out all of these very wacky picks. Decides to come out, swing it into Use, but unfortunately wasn't able to pick up the win. Use with their very traditional hype-scaling Jinx, Victor. And of course, Ruby and Reptile ended up taking over this game come the end of it. And of course, also Lorox as well, picked up so many kills.
And then, of course, the final game that we saw here, Bifrost up against Fnatic Queso, NLC taken down by the Spanish region in the end. And it looked very, very comfortable. Bifrost backs to the wall for large portions of this game, but in the end, we're not able to make a comeback or make any changes. But hey, that's only 6 games down. We've got so many more in the group stages to be bringing you. And hey, we know what a lot of these teams are about, but we don't necessarily know what they're all up to. Group B still unplayed. But let's have a quick look at the standings to see exactly who won, who lost, and who is yet to play. As you can see, Jamada, we were talking about this with a couple of the other talent, and it's very much a case of the results are what we expected, but the routes we took to get there, maybe a little bit less so.
Yeah, I think definitely yesterday some of the games, whilst like you say, we ended up with the expected results, games a lot closer than maybe anticipated, right? I think LDLC not necessarily looking shaky or anything. I think Atleta just showing up and playing a very strong game and their own game yesterday into LDLC. I think as well, you know, Fnatic maybe taking a little bit longer to close out on Bifrost than maybe anticipated given how the early game went. But yeah, like you say, everyone picking up wins where we expected it. It's just the route to get there was definitely not what we expected.
And we've got Group B coming through as well. We're going to see all of those teams in Group B playing today, but this is exactly the matchups that we're going to be watching. So Unicorns of Love Sexy Edition will be taking on Atleta Esport in our first matchup of the day. And honestly, there's nothing but great games here. I'm especially looking at the second half of the day. You've got X7 Esports K-Corp coming in hot at 8 p.m. today.
Yeah, no, I think that's obviously the biggest match to watch today, right? X7, Carmine Corp. There's already been a little bit of, back and forth on Twitter between the organizations and sometimes the fandoms too. So I'm very excited to watch that, of course, as an LC representative, but also just as a League of Legends enjoyer. I think Bifrost BDS also has promised to be a very exciting game, and LDLC Bisons too. But I think our opening game of the day is one that I'm really looking towards and saying, I kind of want to see what Atleta can do into Unicorns, because Atleta looked a lot stronger than maybe anticipated, given, the result against LDLC yesterday. So I think against, Unicorns here, I want to see whether they're going to stick to, what the kind of their own style of what we saw yesterday, or whether they're going to stick to something maybe, or move towards something a little more traditional.
And I mean, of course, we've got the first look at Gamer Legion that we're going to get this tournament when they go up against Team Phantasma, and Fnatic Queso looking slow, steady, disciplined, whether they can bring through another win against an Eska team who passed a couple of interesting decisions towards the end of the matchup, looked really scrappy and really strong when they came to fighting and taking those picks early. So I'm really excited to see how that game goes. But let's turn our attention towards this first game of the day, shall we? Because we talked a lot. We were sitting down to do some prep before the broadcast, and a lot of our talking points actually came down to Atleta because, hey, they're 0-1 at the moment, but they looked really, really interesting the way they were playing. They looked very, very strong in parts of their game. And on a different day, they could have taken down LDLC.
Yeah, and I think it plays into both parties there. I think LDLC maybe yesterday, maybe a little bit complacent. It's hard to really say. Maybe they just had a bit of an off day. They obviously still played a very strong game of League of Legends, enough to take down Atleta. But I think if Atleta were maybe a little more on the ball with some forms of execution, particularly sort of like 15, 20 minutes onwards, I think their early game was fine. But the issue was when they were making the plays they're making in the early game, for example, they went for the bottom lane dive. Prior to that, they'd lost the Herald. Ica managed to sneak away with the Herald. And whilst that play was going on in the bottom lane, Ica just took, I think it was 4 plates all to himself as a LeBlanc. That's absolutely absurd amounts of gold to be cross-mapped onto one individual member. I think if they can clean up these kind of moments in the game where they go for their own plays, and if they know they're giving up the cross-map, as long as they're not giving up too much, I think they can be okay into a Unicorns team, which can definitely play a much slower version of League of Legends. I think yesterday, obviously, they kind of had to play a slightly slower game with their draft and also into what Bisons were playing, but if they play, again, a very slow draft today, I think Atleta can honestly take it to them and probably procure a relatively large gold lead if Unicorns are caught sleeping.
And I'm very interested because you mentioned one of the things that a lot of the talent that was covering the games yesterday was talking about, which is what separates our really top-tier contender teams to the teams that are very strong, dominant in their own regions, but perhaps aren't going to make it as far on the European stage, is the idea of, hey, anyone can make a dive happen, anyone can get a pick down in the bot lane, in the top lane when you've got a numbers advantage, but what are you turning that into? What are you gaining in a macro sense if it's not just going to be 1 kill, 2 kills? How are your plates doing? Is there a dragon? Is there a Rift Herald? What can you gain? And for a couple of these teams that we're going to be watching today, they weren't really able to make those correct decisions, and the trade-off wasn't always the best for them. So that's especially what we're going to be watching out for in this first game. As you said, Unicorns, they play a slightly slower version of League of Legends. They are capable of speeding things up. We've seen that a little bit, especially in play-ins as they came forward.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're yet to drop a game at this tournament. At this Amazon EU Masters, they are currently undefeated. So we'll see if they can keep that run going for now, because they definitely do look very strong. And like you say, and like we've sort of mentioned, they do lean on a slightly slower style of play sometimes. But as seen at play-ins, they're very capable of playing fast-paced drafts. It's just whether or not they actually feel like they have to, it seems like. And I feel like into Atleta, this is maybe the kind of team where you don't necessarily want to rest on your laurels, just on the off chance that, you draft, again, something like a Victor and a Jinx, where maybe depending on the matchups, there's not really too much agency, and then all of a sudden they'll come out of this super aggressive early to mid-game draft, and they just take over the game, and it just feels impossible to play from behind.
I mean, if they can make strong early game plays and they can take kills away from LDLC, then any team's going to have to be looking over their shoulder and saying, maybe we need to be prepping for these guys a little bit differently. And of course, Atleta, you're hearing us talk about them a lot. You might not have heard the name if you're just a standard Amazon European Masters fan who just watches this league and maybe your own region. They are a new name within the scene. It's their first split in the ERL. They came second in the regular season and then taking down Matchco to get themselves their spot in the main event. Of course, Matchco, a lot of the Italian fans were saying, is a very, very strong team. But let's have a quick look at the lineup that we've got going forward in this game. It's going to be Unicorns of Love coming in first. Ibo, Lurox, Ruby, Reptile, and Dreamer Ace. A lot of familiar faces from the Prime League there.
Yeah, definitely a lot of very familiar faces. Lurox you'd have seen at the tournament before. Ruby and Reptile, very strong carries, especially it feels like Unicorns, they love to lean on Ruby in the later stages of the game. And they tend to, despite Ibo definitely being capable of playing some stronger carries, leave him to his own devices very frequently so that they can ensure that Ruby and Reptile are set up for the later stages of the game.
And Reptile had an absolutely amazing second half of the game performance on the Jinx yesterday, was left to his own device a lot by Dreamer Ace moving around the map and trying to get things going in other lanes, and he was kind of just sitting behind tower, living his best life, and was able to eventually come out a couple of the late game team fights, double kills, triple kills, doing all the damage we know hyper carries are famous for. But this Unicorns Love Sexy Edition lineup, definitely an exciting one to keep your eyes open for. And as you mentioned, Ruby might be the star player. Lots of these teams where they go far in the Amazon European Masters have that one shining light. Do they have that on the other side? We're going to have a look at the roster coming up against Unicorns of Love in this game. At ladder, we got Gabo, Mighty Dragon, Zonix, Enz, and Cosmet.
Yeah, a very strong, very experienced lineup. No matter where you look, Enz, Cosmet, Gabo, they've all played and won the PG NAS together. Mighty Dragon and Zonix as well, a lot of time in the LCL, the CIS region, where actually, funnily enough, they've been denied respectively MSI and Worlds appearances by Unicorns of Love. So this is kind of, in a way, a bit of a grudge match for them. When you think about sort of player against organization, I think they're going to feel very, very great if they walk away with a win here, not just because it'll be their first win here at the tournament, but more specifically because they'll be taking down the Unicorns.
As you said, this team, all these players have been to European Masters before. They've been to plenty of European Masters between them, but they've never really got out of groups. They're very, very experienced at this level of play. But now we've got the dream team together on Atlanta. Are they going to be able to go one step further and actually find their exit to the quarterfinals rather than an exit with a plane ticket home?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a very interesting topic to talk about when it comes to the PG Nats, because I think, you know, having sort of seen a lot of discussion around Matchco and then also Atlanta, I feel like a lot of people, you know, even post playoffs, were still kind of mentally ranking Matchco as the slightly stronger team in comparison to Atlanta. But I think right now, given what I saw, you know, from Matchco and Plains and what I've seen, at least from the one game sample size here at this tournament for Atlanta, maybe Atlanta could actually make a run if they can get things going for themselves, right? If they can put themselves in a position where, you know, they don't have to win the game in the first 20 minutes, like what I felt like it was yesterday against LDLC. But again, traditionally, Italian teams, they do come in with these slightly, I'll dub it, spicier styles of play where they want to kind of, you know, kind of get things over and done with within about 25 minutes. Otherwise, things don't typically go their way. But we'll see, because like we've kind of highlighted a lot of experience in this roster, and there's naturally with that experience going to come a lot of flexibility, and hopefully for them today against the Unicorns, it will work out for them, because going 0-2 or starting the group 0-2 is often not like a death sentence, but it's going to be very hard to come back from that 0-2 to try and make a run into quarters.
Yeah, setting yourselves up with a massive mountain to climb coming out of your first 2 days, and the first 2 days here at the Amazon European Masters, it's never something that you want to be doing. And I know that's really easy to say, but with Unicorns of Love, if they could grab themselves a second win, the opposite is almost the same to be true, because they come in and say, look, we've taken down 2 teams already. We're going to have to play you again, so we know that we're already stronger. We already know that we've got your number at least once. Now it's just a case of grabbing a couple of extra wins and qualifying out of groups into those best of series. We are coming very, very shortly towards our first game of the evening. Jamana, these 2 teams, there's so much history, there's so much storyline with a lot of the players involved. I can't wait to get started.
No, neither can I. And I'm really looking forward mostly to the draft, I think. I want to see what Atlanta will do different compared to yesterday. I also want to see whether or not, you know, Unicorns watched the game yesterday and say, okay, do we want to kind of sit on our hands for the first 15-ish minutes or so, play a slower style draft where, you know, the sort of standard what we see mostly on 12-6, where it's kind of an early aggressive jungler, sometimes more often than not sort of a weak side top, hype carry AD, something that scales in the mid lane, or are they going to do sort of more aggressive drafts like what we saw out of them in Plains, where they lock in something like the Silas with a kill jungler as well, and they just try and play off the mid jungle 2v2 and move that pressure down.